Welcome to the Creative Chats Podcast with Mike Brennan. Welcome, friends, to another episode of Creative Chats. It's the podcast for artist makers and content creators where we talk about creativity, the creative process, and story. I'm your host, Mike Brennan. You can connect with me on my website, which is mikebrennan.me, and I would love for you to check out all the resources that I have there just for you as a creator. I know what it's like to be in the thick of things, feeling alone, feeling the sense of imposter syndrome, being frustrated by lack of opportunities, lack of consistency in how you show up and when you show up to actually create, all those things and more. And so I've created some resources to be a help, to be a guide, to be a resource for you. And so it would be tremendous if you went over to dailycreativehabit.com, checked out the free resources there. There is a Facebook group that is a great community. We're nearing 1,000 people right now, and I would love for you to join in there. Be amongst some people who are creating all types of different things. You can post questions, you can post work in progress. Have it be a place where sometimes you just need some cheerleading, and sometimes you have some questions, and sometimes you can answer some questions for someone else. So head over to dailycreativehabit.com and check out those resources today. Now, for this episode, I get to sit down with Nicole Leverett. And Nicole is an amazing photographer. We talk about her journey, her experience of growing up, having all types of different creative outlets and experiences, and how this really ushered in what she does now, how she thinks about things, her process. And I think you're really going to enjoy as she unpacks her journey and talks about what's important to her, talks about why she's showing up, doing the things she's doing, and how she also has a heart to serve and help other people, answering questions and sharing the information that she has learned along the way. So without further ado, here is my creative chat with Nicole Leverett. Well, Nicole, welcome to the Creative Chats podcast. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I've been looking forward to our chat for the longest.
Yeah, me too. I'm glad we got connected, and I've heard, a little bit of your story that enticed me to go, oh, you need to be on the show. And I can't wait for people to hear more about your journey, your experiences, your work, all the things today. So yeah, this is going to be good. I'm excited.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Yeah. So thinking about your creativity, is there maybe one particular moment? I know that you've shared with me previously about some childhood things and revolving around creativity, but is there maybe one particular moment that's a standout moment for you that was like, this tells me that I am a creative person?
It's so hard to pinpoint one precise moment, but I find myself thinking about the time that I spent with my grandfather one summer. So my grandfather, he was in the Army, and when he got out, he worked as a color matcher. He was an artist for his whole life, but as a job, he was matching. Like now you can just use an eyedropper to pick the colors. He was physically matching the colors. And when he retired, he wanted to keep himself busy. So he enrolled into school, taking art classes at the community college, not really to get a degree or anything like that, just to keep busy and be creative and have inspiration. And during the summer, when I wasn't in school, sometimes he would watch me and he would take me along. So I remember one day, he showed me his notebook of all his homework assignments, and he gave me my own notebook, and I had to do the same homework assignments. And I think about that summer so often because literally every day I was doing something creative, whether we were using charcoal or pencils or doing things on the computer as well, because I was playing around in paint and drawing and painting and, things like that, and very primitive stages of my digital creativity. But I just think about that time so often, and I feel like that was a really foundational moment of building the blocks of I actually really like creating and doing things like this.
Yeah. And what a gift, because you got to see up close someone else pursuing it and telling you it's possible. I think so many times I've talked to people where they didn't have someone that they knew close to observe and to see, well, this is what this actually looks like. This is what this could be as my work, not just simply a hobby or some other, personal interest. And so it was only like later on in life that a lot of people tried to surround themselves with that to figure that out. But you, from a young age, had that. That's amazing. And to be able to actually ask questions and engage and give you a place to play and explore. I mean, that's completely amazing. Was there one thing in particular maybe that you were drawn towards in terms of like a medium or some project maybe out of those things that really stands out?
Not really, again, because I feel like I really threw myself into so many different things. So I can think back to doing calligraphy. I did cross stitching. I made jewelry. Like, I felt like part of who I am is creating things with my hands and also figuring out how things work. So I guess that's like both sides of my brain. Like, I needed to know how to do something and like the inside and outside of like how it works, and then I could like, do whatever I wanted to do and break all the rules, I guess, that I learned.
Yeah.
So there's like so many things that I can point to where it's like I wasn't quite sure if it was something that I really wanted to do, but I wanted to try it. And even now I'm still doing that as an adult. Like, I just feel like, why not?
Yeah. Yeah. Was that something that was like a revelation to you at a certain point as far as like having those two parts of going, I need to actually understand this and dissect it and figure out what makes it tick and then be able to actually break the rules and do my thing. Was that like, was there a moment of revelation or a reflection where you were like, "Ah, this helps me understand myself better"?
It's funny. I feel like that revelation didn't occur until recently when I picked up photography. Because initially, when I got my camera, I was like, okay, I'm going to read the manual and I'm going to know how this camera works and I'm going to take amazing pictures. That did not happen. I read that manual. I was like, I still have no idea what makes a good photo. So that snowballed into a whole other like deep dive of like, how do you create like really good images? Thinking also back to my father, he he went to school for economics, but I feel like he has an engineer brain as well. So I would see things in myself that I would also see in him. Like I might have been the only kid I know that was getting Happy Meal toys and then finding a screwdriver to take it apart to see how it worked, because I needed to know like how is this little gadget operating, and then I would put it back together. So, like I feel like that was always like a part of it. So like when I got the camera, it was like, okay, technically I need to know what all these buttons do, and then everything else I'll figure out. But there wasn't really that revelation when I was younger. It was just like, this is what I'm doing and this is how I am.
Yeah. It's very affirming when you can look back though and see moments in your life when you're like, this was happening intuitively. And this tells me that this is how I'm wired. This is how I think. This is what's important to me. And when you actually then set that before you with intention and purpose, it's empowering because then okay, if it doesn't work this way, then I'm probably fighting against something or I'm going in a wrong direction. And so I know these are my values. This is how I work. I can use that to my advantage in this, and it becomes your superpower, right?
Yeah, I agree.
So as your story and journey progresses, right, you're growing from a child, and then you have these creative interests and pursuits. What does that look like as you start to enter school and think about,
Yeah, so I can think back as early as like middle school. So I went to a private school from sixth grade to 12th grade, the same private school. So up until fifth grade, there wasn't really anything in school. Actually, I take that back. My creative writing course in fifth grade, that always stands out to me. We were writing poems, we were researching poems, and I really liked that. I didn't think I was going to be a writer, but English and writing was also a strength that I had. So I enjoyed that class, but I also enjoyed science and not so much math until later. But when I started private school, I remember we did have an art class and we did some interesting things. I remember one year we were making a Christmas village, but we were using bar soap. So we each had a bar of soap and we had some carving tools and we had to make a village. So everybody had their assigned task, And I just thought that was so cool to like make the snow. And it's like, what soap did you get? I use Irish Spring. I'm like, that's green. Like, why did you? But like it was just so fun. And we also did sketches, we did self-portraits, and it was like just very cool to just know that like there was no right or wrong answer in that class. It was just like we're just here to create. So that really stands out to me. And then as I got older, again, I really appreciate my parents for just like encouraging me to like do these things. One day I was like, I want to take violin lessons. And so my mom found a teacher nearby, and that teacher encouraged me to do viola instead of violin because there were so many violin players, not many viola players, and it's a similar instrument. I think I just wanted to like hold the instrument. I didn't really know anything about classical music at that time, but ended up taking viola lessons. That led me to an orchestra camp that I went to one summer where there were electives, and one of the electives was calligraphy. So then, of course, I dived headfirst into calligraphy. I had all the pen nibs, the ink, the paper, and I pursued calligraphy for a very long time, actually longer than I did viola lessons. And I actually won a couple contests in high school for calligraphy. So like there was always something. And it was never like, okay, I'm going to be a creative when I grew up. I always said I wanted to be a doctor or some kind of scientist because science was also a very strong drive for me. Like I really loved the sciences. So I never really thought that I could work as a creative. It was always like, no, this is just, a hobby. This is what I like to do. It's fun. I never thought I was very good at drawing, but I would doodle and sketch. And then when, creating on the computer came about, like that, like created a whole new avenue of ways to create and do things digitally. And like one Christmas, I asked my dad for Photoshop. This was back when like Photoshop first came out. It was like 1998. And he's like, that's way too expensive and you don't even know what you're doing. So he got me a similar program that was cheaper, Corel Draw. And side note, my dad built computers. So again, that engineer brain of building things and figuring out things, how they work. So my dad's very tech savvy. So he knows all the things. So he bought me a cheaper version of Photoshop, and I dove into that, and I was creating digital pieces of art. I wish I still had them, but I don't think I do. But that like snowballed into other things, and then creating logos and websites. That just like through my high school and a little bit into college, that was like fun for me. Like my friends would have web pages like, oh, can you, make a scrolling marquee or blinking text, all the all the things we used to do in like Angel Fire and everything like that. So, I feel like the creativity that I had, it kept evolving as the technology evolved as well.
Yeah. I hear you following your curiosity in all those things. That at the core, like the mediums may change, the modalities may change, but at the core of it is your curiosity to get in there, to figure out what makes it work, to have some kind of experience around that, and then add that to your toolbox, right? And I love that you said something about like, it wasn't that you thought like, oh, well, I'll be a creative when I grow up kind of thing, but you were like being a creative in the moment as you went. You didn't wait for something, you didn't wait for permission, and you took advantage of the opportunities that were before you and explored the things that were of interest to you. Do you think that there's a moment where you find things that are adjacent to the sweet spot for you and get kind of lulled into that for a little bit before you find a sweet spot? Like, has that been your experience at all?
Yeah, I feel like there's been aspect, and I think part of it is trying to monetize something. I feel like when I was designing websites and logos and like monetizing it, that's when kind of like the joy got sucked out of me because it was no longer I was creating things that I liked. I had to create what the client wanted. So finding that balance of like, where can I create what I want to create that I think looks good, but also whoever's asking for it also thinks it looks good. I feel like that's always a tricky part. And it's something I still struggle with a bit, even with photography, because, nobody is ever going to always be on the same page and have the same way of viewing, one situation. So I do feel like that's kind of where I would pursue something, and then if it wasn't quite, what I was thinking it was going to be, like, for example, with the logos, it was kind of like, you know what, I'm going to pivot away from this. I still do it. I still create logos and websites, but I'm choosing not to do it for money. And I feel like that's when it changes. It's no, it's like, all right, on to the next.
Yeah. And it's something that I think a lot of creatives struggle with because we're so taught and told that, well, follow your passion and everything is a side hustle, right? Like, you have a skill set, great, add it, and it's another offer that you can make and everything else. And while that's great to a certain degree, usually people aren't very forthcoming with, but it will take its toll on your joy of the process and your love for what it is that you do, because all of a sudden you've attached all these pressures of money and other people's expectations and time factors and like all the things that can chip away and make the experience of creating so much less than what you would normally do if you just had kind of the freedom to do it because you just love the thing. And so I think it's important to have places like I've had to go through this as well, where you have like passion projects. You have projects that are just yours and like
Hmm.
nobody else is going to touch that. Nobody else gets to speak into that. You just do what you want to do. And then you have the other things of, here's what I'm monetizing and here's for client-based things and whatnot. And I think it's important to have both of those because if you have one, you have all the passion, you have no money, right? And if
Right.
you have all the clients, then you probably stripped away a lot of the passion stuff. So having that balance, making sure that you make that a priority has been something that's been really important for me. And I encourage other creatives to do as well. You mentioned about like doing logos and some of the other things now because you just enjoy it. Are there other things that you do that are kind of just yours that are kind of your passion projects?
Yeah, so I'm actually trying to get back to more of that. So when I started in photography, it was during the pandemic, and of course, everything was shut down. So it's like, okay, I just got this camera in the summer and now everything's closed. The world is closed. Like, what am I doing? And I still wanted to learn all the ins and outs of my camera. So I decided I was going to photograph what was in my house. So that was food, beverages, and products because that's all I had. So that's where I started. And a lot of it was my husband, who's a mixologist. I'm like, if you make a drink every week, I'll photograph it. And then that's how I'm going to get better. And that turned into a blog. And it was just something that we did for fun. Like every week, we were like, okay, what drink are we making? And, we'd share the recipe. And then that's what turned into food photography and product photography as a business. But for the very beginning, I was just creating just to create. And I remember I was like, you know what? I can cook, but like you run out of ideas after a while. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to get these meal prep companies to help me. So I would order from a meal prep company, they'd send it to me, I'd make it, add my little, zhuzh to it, and then photograph it. And that stuff, there was no pressure, there was no anything. It was just me figuring out like, okay, what angles, what lighting, what looks good. And I really enjoyed that time. And also I found that people liked seeing the recipes and seeing the cocktails that we would create. So when I got really busy more recently with client stuff, I had to pause on the personal stuff and I miss it. So that's something I definitely want to bring back. And then also, thinking about other ways of being creative. So recently I started crocheting because, of course, I'm always chasing something to do. So I realized I actually really like this, and I've thought about ways of incorporating crocheting into photography. So I have a couple creative ideas that I want to pursue, but I was like, I should know how to crochet if I want to incorporate it into a photo rather than try and figure out how to AI it. So, you know, I'm in that learning process now, but like that's really fun to just be able to create without like thinking about, well, how am I going to make money doing this? Like maybe that'll come along the way, but right now it's just fun to create.
Yeah. Yeah, I was having a conversation this morning actually with a friend, and he was talking about how he has, these multiple creative outlets, and he was struggling with kind of, I guess, focusing and feeling like he was just a little bit stuck because he wasn't really sure what to do next. And I guess thinking in terms of, well, there's obviously ones that you could pursue that'll bring more money, and then there's other ones that are attached to more meaning, and just trying to navigate that whole system. And he was like, have you ever experienced this? Do you have any advice on this? And I was like, dude, that's my life. Like, that's right where I live all the time. It sounds like you're the same, where you have these multiple interests and pursuits and things happening. How do you navigate that space where you're like, you know, knowing when to pull back because you need something that's more meaningful,
Hmm.
and when to pour gas on things that are more client based because you're like, obviously money, it's not like you're ever going to go like, I have enough money, I'm good.
Right, right. Never.
So how do you personally navigate that?
That's honestly my life, like right now as we speak. It's definitely challenging. And for me, going back to what we were talking about earlier, I started losing some of the love for photography. And I'm like photography has had a hold on me, unlike any other creative pursuit that I've had. So I'm like, I don't want to get to a point where I am not excited to pick up my camera and take a photo, because I treat it like a mindfulness activity, because when I'm got my camera in my hand, that's almost like meditation for me. Like everything else goes away. So I'm like, I don't want to get to the point where I'm dreading picking up the camera. So I actually made a tougher decision earlier this year to be more selective about the clients that I work with. Like, is this going to add to my portfolio? Is this something that I really enjoy doing? Or did I just say yes because the money was nice? So making those hard decisions to really, choose the projects that really speak to me or that I really align with, more so than just, oh, it was nice, consistent money, because that's not why I'm doing it. I'm not doing it solely for the money. So it's definitely it's been interesting, but it's also allowed me to slow down a bit. And now I realize, oh, I do have time to pursue, like, personal things, or even just, hang out with my family. And it's not like, oh, I got 3 shoots to edit and deliver in 2 days.
Yeah, and it's really protecting your energy and your time, your ability to do a finite amount of things,
Yes.
choosing what is best for you. And sometimes best, it looks crazy to somebody else, right? Somebody else may be like, you're turning down those jobs, you're turning down that money, like what's wrong with you? But you know for yourself, this is the right next step for me. It may not always look like this, but for
Right.
right now, this season, that's what it looks like.
Right.
One of the other things you talked about was like getting into your manual for your camera and just kind of going like, I need to figure this thing out. I need to know how to use all the buttons and all the settings and everything. Can you talk a little bit about the difference between like the technical aspects of things and actually having taste and a style?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like when I talk to a lot of photographers, I feel like it's a common thread of just having an eye. Like you kind of just know. And it's kind of like, even I realized, like, without even knowing it, probably from the time I spent with my grandfather, like color theory was just in me. Like I didn't know the terms for all of the different ways that colors can play nice together. I didn't know all of that, but I knew it. So like I started putting things together and like, oh, that just looks good. Like just does. And then as I'm, learning more in this craft, because I want to make sure that, I have the formula to like always create a good image, I realized, oh, there are rules in place for this. And so when I had the manual for the camera, it was nice to be like this button, I can change it, and okay, I can use that to focus, and this is how I get to these menu options. But that really wasn't teaching me anything about taking a photo. And one of the first kind of lessons that I was exposed to shortly after getting my camera, this was before the world shut down. I went to a conference in Pennsylvania, and it was this well known photographer, Scott Kelby. He was just talking in general about composition and taking photos. And he was mainly talking about landscape photography. And at the time, I had no idea even what type of photography I wanted to do. But he had a couple of like interesting tips that were like super simple, like understanding like, ISO, shutter speed, and things like that. Some of the technical things. But he's like, if you do this, then you can forget about your settings and focus on composing the image. And he talked about foreground and background and all of that. And it was kind of like, oh, wow, there's like, other things that I should be thinking about, not just, these buttons and pointing and shooting, kind of like how we do with our cell phones. So that kind of was like the turning point for me of like switching from, okay, it's not just about the technical and how the camera works, but how do you compose a really good shot? What are those ingredients to a really good photo?
Yeah. And to be able to pour into yourself, to have the inspiration, to have the taste being built up in you because you're surrounding yourself with the quality work that other people have been doing. So I like that you say, it was like this intuitive thing for you, this color, because I feel the same way.
Mm-hmm.
There are things that sometimes people ask me like, well, can you teach me that? Or can you explain that more? And I'm like, I'd have to really stop and like backtrack so far to figure out why do I think that, or what's the response there, because it does just happen in the moment. Because when you're in that mode and you've already done that work, sometimes it's harder to actually explain it than just to do it. So I
Yeah,
completely get
absolutely.
that. What has been like most surprising to you, I think, about your creative journey so far?
I think what's been surprising was the moment that I really decided to marry the graphic design part of like what I like to do with like photography. So like when I started with food, beverage, and product, it was very straightforward. Like what I was seeing, I was like, okay, here's a sandwich, here's a piece of chicken, here is a bottle of lotion. Like it was very straightforward. But I think there was a moment where I was like, wait a second, before you were doing all this work playing around on the computer, like why aren't you doing that with your own images? Because I would find other people's images and I would manipulate the crap out of them. So I'm like, why aren't you doing that with your own work? And that was kind of like the light bulb moment where it was like, oh, I can really create like things that I want to create only with the technical ability of using the camera, because I do a lot of in-camera work, but I can further enhance the image using Photoshop and things like that. So I feel like that was like super pivotal for me to create super unique pieces. And like I always say, it's like the weird things that are inside my head where it's like I have no idea how this is going to be received, but it's burning in my head and I have to do it. Like, for example, there's one image, two images that I made where I kind of like took my body parts off. I decapitated myself. I'm like, I don't know what people are going to think about this. Like, some people said it was demonic. I don't know. I had an idea. I wanted to hold my head in my arm. So I did it. And then I had another one. I was like, I want to make myself like a Barbie doll and like have my arm over here, my leg over there. Just, it was fun. So like, and those are the things where people are like, oh my goodness, that's so creative, that's so fun. And I realized for me that was something that I really enjoyed doing, not just dismembering myself, but reaching into the corners of my brain where all my weird ideas are just floating around and making them real, because why not?
Yeah, absolutely. It makes me think of like maybe there's something down the road for you where you take some other curiosity that you had, let's say like even crocheting, and you somehow incorporate that into photography. Maybe you have prints made and you're crocheting something around or with it or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
combining things. I love doing those kind of things too, because that's usually when you reach something that's unexpected.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it becomes a thing, like you said, where people are like, I want to see more of that. That's actually maybe a new thing that you can actually pursue, as opposed to just a one-off of going, well, I tried that and I'm not really sure how I feel about that, and let's move on.
Right. Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that because I do have some ideas more for print. So back in May, I had the amazing opportunity to be a part of an art show, and I had never done that. And I'm like, I have no idea how my art is going to be received, because it's like weird things with food, like okay, a grilled cheese floating in the sky, a butterfly carrying a fried egg, like. Those are the things that I create. So it was actually like an amazing experience. I actually sold two of the pieces, and that also led me to a silent art installation that happened last week. And I created a new piece for that. So I've also been thinking more about print and things like that. And I've also been thinking about ways of combining different mediums, like with the print, like paint and sculpture. I actually saw a piece and it almost looked like in my mind is like a ransom note, like rips of like different images, but then mixed with paint. And I'm like, that could be fun to explore. So definitely a lot of ideas. And I'm like, now that I have a little more free time, I feel less pressure to like work on client stuff. I can actually explore that and see where it goes.
Yeah. And that's the stuff I think that can lead to breakthroughs. And even if like the thing that you do is a bridge to something else, it's not like where you land and go, okay, I'm going to do more of this.
Hmm.
It's still worth it because you need those experiences to play, to experiment, to kind of blow things up and just go like, I don't know what's going to happen, but it's going to be exciting and I'm going to learn some things and follow my curiosity. That's the thing I love about creativity is that we never use it up. There's always something else there's to explore. There's more possibilities. And when people get in places where they're blocked, so often it's because of the pressures and the
Hmm.
um, they've got disconnected from their creativity and probably disconnected from themselves, and to try to re-engage in a way that opens things up again. And I think play is a great way to do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like and it's fun and it's encouraging other people to do it as well, right?
Mm.
And I know that that's something that's important to you too, right? Is to empower other people to be creative and to
Yeah,
share your
absolutely.
experiences with others, right? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So I realized early on when I started like really concentrating on photography and like I try not to think so much about social media and likes and views and things like that, but it was hard to not notice that when I shared behind the scenes, like those really took off. Like people really like seeing how things come together because if I just posted a pretty photo, I'm like, oh, okay, that's nice. But when people saw how much went into creating that one pretty photo, it was like, oh my goodness, that's so cool. I didn't realize, you had to do this, that, and the third. So I realized early on that that was going to be important. And I always say that I don't mind sharing the behind the scenes because I feel like it's like a recipe. Like I can give you the ingredients, but when you do it, it's going to taste different than what I did. Like it's not going to be the same. Like you could literally do the same exact thing as me, but because we see things differently, you might make different choices, especially when it comes down to editing. Like I just feel like there's no harm in me sharing my process because a lot of the times I feel like I'm just trying to figure it out as I go along. Like there's no rules for how do you levitate a sandwich. There are no hard and fast rules. There are some techniques that work better than others, and sometimes you got to play around and mix it up. So I love sharing. I love answering questions. I just like being transparent. And I feel like people have realized that over the years that they can ask a question and I'm going to respond. I always try to respond to every single comment, question on social media that I get. And I just feel like it helps and will help other creatives also realize like I can do that too. So, I'm always thinking about ways that I can give back in that sense of sharing what I know.
Yeah. I think it's so important because we've all had that experience where we've been the beginner and we're looking to the people who've gone before us and said like, can you help me? Can you explain this or share a process or whatever that looks like? And so to be able to be the recipient of that, I think we need to be open-handed on the other end too and say, well, now I'm going to give back. I'm going to share what I've learned. And for the people who are maybe just starting or have more questions too. And that also fosters, I think, a sense of community over competition within the creative environments. And I personally want to see more and more of that because I think when you're in that place and everybody's trying to just look out for themselves and there's like limited opportunity and limited clients and everybody's got this limited mindset, that just breeds more and more just closed. And I think it's far better to be open and available and to be a help to people around you, because then even to know that you maybe had a small part to play in somebody else's story and experience, I mean, that has a ripple effect that maybe a piece of your work could never quite do the same thing,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
100% agree.
So amazing. I thank you for this conversation and just your willingness to share your curiosity that you have shared with us today, that hopefully has been inspiring to other people too, to go, maybe I need to start taking some things apart. Maybe I need to start asking more questions. I think that's amazing. So as we kind of wrap up our time here today, I would love if you would just share, like, where can people go and see your beautiful work and how can they follow you and all the links and places? Where can people go?
Awesome. Thank you so much. This has been such a fun time. So let's go down the list. So on social media, you can find me at Stay in Focus Images. So that's Stay, the letter N, Focus Images, all one word. And that's on Instagram, TikTok, Threads, which I never post to. I'm everywhere, but I'm mainly on Instagram and TikTok. My website is stayinfocus.com. And then I also have an educational page. Everything is linked on my website, the main website, but In Focus Learning, so the letter N, Focus Learning, is where I have some of my educational offers. So I have a digital ebook. It's 100 pages, and it talks about the basics of getting a camera, turning it on, and how do you take a photo. But I also dive into the principles of really good food photography, because that is like near and dear to my heart. I take photos of everything, but food and beverage are, at the top of the list. So I talk a lot about that. And I also have that in a physical form. So if you prefer to have the physical book, I have that as well. And coming soon, I will be creating a video portion where I dive into some of the same aspects, but I want to also add in the creative photography element. So how do you create the magical or whimsical images, some of the images that I create? So that will be coming soon. And then lastly, I do offer a one-on-one mentorship. So I'm based in New Jersey. So if you want to meet in person, that's an option, or we can do it virtually. So all of that is on infocuslearning.com. And then lastly, because I'm getting into prints, I do have a print site, and that's also linked on the main page. It's just through Pixieset, but I picked some of my favorite images, and you're able to order them in prints on canvas or any type of configuration if there's anything that speaks to you. So that is available as well.
Nice. Awesome. Well, I will be sure to put that in the show notes so people can kind of click and go there really easily. I do encourage everyone, of course, whenever there's something visual to experience, to make sure that they don't just listen to or watch the podcast, but they actually go and look at the work of the guest. And so I'm encouraging everybody to do that now. As long as you're not driving in a car right now or doing something dangerous, go and do that. Check out Nicole's work. It is a delight. So, Nicole, thank you so much again for this time today. I wish you all the best, and I can't wait to see what you do next.
Thank you so much, Mike. This has been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks for listening today. I'd appreciate it if you would subscribe, leave a rating and a review. It really helps this podcast be seen and heard by others.